And this new expansion is going to be called the Light and Darkness expansion. But if you're not familiar with the original game, this is an app-driven one versus many campaign game. The app's going to be doing most of your heavy lifting and keeping track of different events and decisions, but it also does allow the ability for the game to be played completely co-op if you don't want to have one person acting as the enemies. Something that's really neat about this game is that each player is going to be choosing their own individual characters, their unique skills and abilities, but then they're also going to be keeping track of all their stats and items on their own dry erase player board. The front of the board is going to allow you to give your character a name, but then also track your health, your mana, your different stats and experience points that you're gaining throughout the game, as well as to write down any weapons or gear that you might have equipped and any items in your inventory. The back of the board also provides a few areas where you can keep track of your various quests that you're able to complete, as well as any skills or spells that you may have gained or mastered as you played throughout the game. Like I said, the game can be played entirely co-op if you do want to play the game that way, but there's also a bunch of other modes of play as well. And if you do want to play with one player acting as the enemy, they're going to be playing from behind a player board, but at the start of the game they also get to pick 2 skills that they'll be adding into their arsenal and they'll be able to take advantage of throughout the game. And that player is not only going to be controlling and activating the various monsters that appear throughout the game, but they're also going to be playing a little bit of Dungeon Master as they do control the dungeon and also reveal certain aspects of the game and the story to the character as it progresses. This means that they'll have additional information as to when certain events or traps could trigger, and they can use their monsters to try and push the other characters into those situations that benefit them. Before a round starts, the app's going to read out any special events that might trigger based on the current state of the game, but then you're going to be moving into the enemies phase where if you do have a player acting as the enemy, they're going to be activating their various monsters that are out on the board, moving and attacking according to those monsters' special abilities, but also intertwining those 2 abilities that they chose at the start of the game. But this player isn't only limited to performing actions during their turn, because they may also intervene during the player's turn, depending on if certain events trigger or if more of the dungeon is revealed, because it's up to the enemy player to handle all of that. But after the enemy's turn, each player is then going to get a chance to perform 2 actions on their turn, and each player is going to be performing movement with their movement die, which is starting as a 6-sided die, but then it can be upgraded throughout the game, which can potentially open up more movement points as the game goes on. Players are going to be using their actions to do things like prepare or engage in battle, and you're going to be rolling dice of different colors depending on the gear and weapons that you have, with some of these colored dice being more desirable than others. Depending on your character, you might also have access to various spells, and of course you're going to be spending mana in order to activate these. If the players are able to get a little bit of breathing room from the enemies, they can also use an action to search the room for various items, or to perform a rest action to heal some of their points or mana, and also potentially recover from some negative effects. The game continues like this, alternating between the players and the enemies, but there is also one more thing that I want to point out that I think is really cool, and that's that players can actually make a pact with the enemy, which will gain them a special ability card. These are usually pretty powerful and give you certain effects, but they also get triggered at certain situations that the players don't necessarily always control. Players will be trying to use this to their advantage, but once they fully utilize that card, it's going to be coming back to the enemy player with a special ability that's going to make that enemy more powerful. So there is a trade-off here, and the enemy player is going to want to be strategic when they do make these pacts. The new expansion is just going to be adding more of everything into the game, so you can just expect a lot more characters and enemies and dungeons and quests to discover. But they also did a lot more work on the narrative, making it a lot more rich and also introducing some new mechanisms along the way as well. If this sounds like something you'd like to check out, or if you already own the game and you want even more to experience, you can find a link to this campaign in the description below.